Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 29.
Episode 29. Ben,
What?
I had a watershed moment in the last couple of weeks, and I've decided that you do so much good preparation work for this podcast that I'm going to start taking my tiny little segment very, very seriously. And so here are the 3 facts that I have about the number 29.
Awesome.
First of all, it's the 10th prime number. So, woo! Prime numbers, everybody. Those are amazing. It is the atomic number of copper, which is the state mineral of Arizona, because we have copper. Also, this is my favorite one. It is the sum of 3 consecutive squares. So 2 squared plus 3 squared plus 4 squared is 29.
Holy crap. That was outstanding. You completely caught me off guard, and I loved it.
Awesome. I'm glad. I hope there are at least a couple more nerds out there that appreciate
this episode is brought to you by the number 29. To follow up from last week, if you listen to episode 28, and if you haven't, why not? We talked about what would happen if there were alternate timelines where we'd made different decisions. And I think we enjoyed that so much that we decided to do our second ever Patreon-only exclusive bonus episode, which we called Evil Bad at Magic. And you and I talked about the if we were evil and what that would be like. So if you want access to that content, you can go join Patreon. We don't have any minimum in order. You can just go be a supporter for however much you want to give to show your support for the program, and you can listen to that episode.
That was a really fun episode to do because episode 28, like you said, we explored alternate timelines. Like we accepted this is the darkest timeline, so where is the grass greener? But then in our bonus episode, we just like, you know what? This is the darkest timeline. Let's embrace it. Let's become evil geniuses and or supervillains. How would it work? And here's what we would do.
Yeah. Now it's time for a little bit of Bad at English. So I don't know why this week, but a phrase that the British used to use when I was in England came to my mind, and it's the phrase "gone off." They would say the phrase "gone off" particularly in respect of food that was perishable. So they would say like, "This milk is gone off," or "This milk is off." And they used that phrase so exclusively that they didn't have others that they could use in its place like ones that we use. So what would you say if you were trying to say that milk had gone off?
I would probably say the milk had gone bad. Milk expired.
Gone
sour.
bad, expired, sour, spoiled. Those are all words we use. So I put this phrase to my British question. I put this question to my friends on social media, my British friends, and I asked them, so if milk has gone off, where is it gone? And some really entertaining answers I got back. Some of them were like, well, that's a really good question. I never thought about that before. Where has it gone? And one of my British friends been like, well, what do Americans say? So I said a lot of the same kind of things you said. But then I got some entertaining answers like, my friend Jenny says, off. It's gone off. Wherever it's gone, it's not where it should be.
That sounds like a classic British thing to say.
It does.
I like that very much. Well, it doesn't matter where it's gone. It's supposed to be here.
It's not there anymore. My friend Boo says, it's gone off to the land of things that should never be consumed. It's a real place. Mushrooms and peas also reside there.
I like peas.
Yeah, so, well, Boo doesn't like peas, apparently. And then, so one of my Australian friends also joined in the conversation, and she says, I'm not as good at an Australian accent. Lots of people have gone off in Australian, gone off the rocker, off the brain, off the nut, off the deep end. Maybe they're all looking for the milk.
There is a lot of milk that goes off. No, that's good. That is the perfect phrase to have for the year 2020, because I think we can all agree at this point that 2020 has gone off.
2020 has gone off.
Now, I have to say that Nicole and I picked up a new show on Netflix this past couple of weeks called The In-Betweeners.
I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, it's like a British sitcom about, seniors in high school, or they're in the 12th form or whatever it is in England. It's just one of those standard like adolescent like comedies of just everything that you go through as a teenager trying to figure out how girls work.
Like The Wonder Years or Malcolm in the Middle?
Yes, if both of those were focused exclusively on how male teenagers pursue female teenagers and how awkward it is. So that's basically, and it's Britain, so that's like just the whole thing. But they talk very, very quickly, and if we didn't have like a base level foundational understanding of some of the vocabulary that we use, that they use in that show, we'd be completely lost. And I'm going to thank 100% Bad at English for that.
Awesome. What? So, like, words that we've done in segments on this show have shown up in in-betweeners?
I'm going to say yes, but don't ask me to quote them because they speak at a rate that is 2 or 3 times faster than any American TV show would be allowed to speak. So, like, that's one of those shows, like, you turn on Netflix and you just have it in the background while you're fiddling on your phone. That show requires your full concentration.
Right. All right. Well, if you find any specific examples, let me know.
No problem.
Okay, I had a bad parenting segment I want to do this week. So my wife and I went for a walk last night, and when we got home, my 10-year-old daughter and my 12-year-old daughter were in the main floor bathroom sopping up water off the floor.
Okay, just, with towels and...
Yeah, and they'd had the vanity open, and they pulled everything out that we'd had underneath there, and in the downstairs bathrooms where we keep all, like, the Band-Aids and bandages and cleaning supplies and stuff like that. So they pulled all that out, and we were like, what is going on? And my daughter, in the spirit of being very helpful and giving us a full answer to our question, goes, I don't know what happened. The water was just leaking underneath the sink, and it got all over the place, so we're trying to help out by getting it out from under there.
That's immediately suspicious. Children do nothing helpful under their own volition, so she directly contributed to this situation. This is my immediate, just suspicion.
I love it. Now, my wife and I have a Mars and Venus kind of approach to this kind of thing, and my wife goes, oh, okay, we'll try to figure that out. And I'm immediately thinking, this is suspicious. Why are they trying to help out? This isn't making any sense, and their story isn't adding up. So I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt at first, and I'm doing my investigation. So I turn on the cold water and look underneath the sink, and, no leak when it's on or off. Turn on the hot water, no leak on or off. Close the basin, turn on both water, let the basin fill up, drain the basin, turn off the water, no leak. And then I'm annoyed because I just spent 5 minutes troubleshooting when the kid that caused the problem knows exactly what happened. So I turn to my wife and I'm like, you need to get her back down here and make her tell us the full story. And she's like, well, why would you call her a liar? I'm like, because she's lying.
Let's be clear. I'm not calling her a liar. I am using all of this empirical evidence to point out the fact that she's not telling the truth.
Yeah. So my wife goes around the corner and sits her on the stairs, and I'm kind of still in the bathroom, just kind of checking things out, but really just waiting for the truth to come out so I can find out what actually happened. And she's like, well, when I was filling the rubber glove up with water from the tap...
There it is. It's all coming together now.
And I just went, why didn't you lead with that?
I mean, yes, kids do dumb stuff. That's fine. So this leads into, I try to beat this into my kids. And sometimes it's physically if necessary. Like, if you do something wrong, you're going to get in trouble for it. Like, just own up to it, talk to us about it, and we'll work through it. But if you lie to me about something, that's going to be way worse than whatever it is that you did beforehand. Because I need to be able to trust the words that you say.
Yeah, absolutely. And we try to live by that same thing. But I think there's just that knee-jerk kid reaction where they just got to lie about it the first time. Like, we could have come in the house and she could have said, I was filling up a rubber glove and it made water spray out from underneath the sink. And I would have wasted a lot less time. I would have been, like you said.
That's still suspicious. Water sprayed out from underneath the sink when she was filling up the rubber glove?
Yeah, I think it I don't know, it either went through like the space inside of the faucet apparatus, or it pressurized the line and made one of the seals leak. Either way, it made water come out underneath the sink when she was...
I immediately want to dive in and diagnose this plumbing problem with you for the next 15 minutes.
Yeah, no.
But we'll leave that for another segment.
No. So that was my bad parenting moment for the week. My wife chided me for assuming my daughter was lying, but I got a very satisfying "you were right" out of her from this one.
Ooh, from your spouse or from your child?
Yeah, from my spouse.
Oh man, you got to treasure those moments.
Yeah, I know.
Get your phone. Like, can you say that again?
No. You're going down the wrong path. I cannot gloat. When I get you were right.
I'm not saying
no.
Getting
Gloat. Out the phone and recording it is gloating, and you know it.
Well, in my household, it happens so very rarely that I would have to record it, or else I wouldn't have any empirical evidence that it actually happened.
I can't bring it up later either, or it will never happen again.
Now, are you sure? How old is your daughter that did this?
10.
Okay. So now, like I said before, it's still tickling my brain. Like, how does filling a rubber glove with water cause it to leak underneath the sink? I'm thinking this might be a secondary lie. This might be a fallback position that's still not quite as bad as what actually happened. Did you try to recreate it? Did you?
No, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not spraying water underneath my sink again. I dried it all up and put everything back.
I don't know if that's what happened. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't make any sense from everything I know about faucets.
Yeah. It's a round spout on the end of a square apparatus that has like a plastic... this is boring to talk about. It's plausible. It's very plausible.
Okay, I'll take your word for it as a homeowner.
There's something else I'm bad at. This is one of those things in life where like your personality quirks that seem good on the surface cause problems that you might not otherwise have had. I remember this in the Air Force when they used to have TOs that would require them to treat modern electronics in the same way they used to treat legacy electronics. You know, when you like had you gave a great example when you were talking before about all the aircraft control and landing systems where, you know, it was run on vacuum tubes and stuff that was designed in the 30s. And that kind of stuff, like if you didn't once a year take it out, take it apart, dust everything off, reseat all the cards and put it back together, it would break down spontaneously all the time.
Yes.
But so that culture of taking everything apart once a year kind of translated into modern electronics, and the Air Force was doing that. They were still requiring their technicians to go out and take things apart, and then they found that the electronics were way more reliable, and taking them apart once a year was actually causing more problems than it was fixing.
Well, and let's be clear, when we're talking about IT equipment, this stuff is designed to stay on all the time. Like, if you're talking about, like, especially servers.
Yes.
If you want to shut down an IT server, that's a multi-step process that takes upwards of, like, half an hour.
Again, to be fair, so are air traffic control and landing systems, but electronics have just become a lot more reliable. They produce less extraneous heat. They're more integrated. All those things. So
far less power consumption. Yeah, the whole thing.
The way that this manifests itself in my personality is that I like things to be clean and organized. And sometimes I'll clean and organize something that doesn't necessarily need it, and then it'll cause a problem that didn't exist. So I'd gone to my sister's house 2 weeks ago, and when I came back, my car just had like bugs on the front from driving back and forth to Northern Illinois, and it bugs me. Like, as soon as I get back, I take all my luggage out of the car and I vacuum it out, and then I want the outside to be clean too. But my wife hadn't come with me, and I hadn't seen her in 4 days, and I'm like, hey, do you want to go with me to the car wash? Normally, this is the kind of thing I do by myself, and she doesn't come. She said sure, because she missed me too, and she jumped in the car, and we went to the car wash. Because she was with me, and I didn't want her to get annoyed with my chore and my neuroticism, I went to the closer car wash that I never go to. Bad mistake. It was in ill repair, and I didn't realize it, but one of the rails that keeps you from hitting the sides of the car wash was so rusted that it had tipped over and the bolts were protruding, and I drove over the top of it, and it punctured the sidewall of my tire, ruined the tire.
Oh,
dude. So as soon as I pull out of the car wash, I have a flat tire, and not just like a little flat tire, like all the way flat in 10 seconds.
Like you're on the rim, flat tire.
Yeah.
So then, first of all, you burned the car wash to the ground. And second, you like railed against the manager that would dare allow this thing to come into such disrepair.
I'll get to that. I gotta finish the actual physical problem. So I pull out on the road, and I feel the feeling of a flat tire, and I also get the warning on the dash that I got a flat tire. So I pull into the next available parking lot, and I knew it came from the car wash. There was no like doubt. It wasn't like maybe I picked up a nail on the road or anything. It was like I must have gotten the flat tire in the car wash. So I pull over, and I pull in, and I get out, and the previous owner that I bought this car from, it's a 2007 Acura TL, had put wheel locks on the rims. They're like alloy rims. Maybe they were nice, but
not worth
15 years ago.
Wheel locks are never worth it because you get into this scenario.
So I go, and then I look in my glove compartment. The last time I'd seen the wheel lock is when I'd gone to get like the brake service at the mechanic, and I get the wheel lock out and give it to him. So it's nowhere to be found, like not in my car at all.
Of course it's not. Of course it's not. That's something that you just never have.
So now I can't change the flat. So Now, like, if I just let my car sit in the garage with the bugs on the front for a little while, it would have been fine. But no, I had to, like, drive to the car wash, and I gave myself a flat tire, and now the wheels are locked on. I have a flat tire. I can't drive it, and I can't fix it. So I'm thinking, do I call a locksmith? What do I do? And I finally just like, okay, fine. And my wife and I walked home. We got 2 other cars, and we don't need them all right now. So I'm not driving to work every day. So we walked home, and I just like slept it off. I got up the next day, and I went back to the car and found the packaging that it came in, and it had a little code, and I was able to order a replacement key for the wheel locks. And got it overnighted, and it came overnight from New York. I was really impressed with that. It was there by noon the next day.
Wow, that is nice.
Yeah. So then I was able to go out and change the flat, and then I took it to the store. And the store I bought it from didn't have any of the same tires, so I went to a different store. Long story short, it cost me $180 to get one tire replaced so that it matched the rest of the set, which still had plenty of life on them.
Ugh.
So between the $40 to get the new key overnighted, the $180 to get the new tire, and the $15 for the car wash, that car wash cost me like $250.
Okay, so now that brings us to my favorite part of the story, the wrath of Ben Rich. Let me hear how you then made the universe suffer for this inconvenience.
Okay, so I had this conversation with my wife. This is a conversation we have a lot in lots of different forms when an injustice happens. And it is that we want to kind of make sure that the response is appropriate to the injustice. Like, I'm not going to like call for a congressional inquiry because a coin-operated car wash is in ill repair. And there are no attendants on duty. So this is the problem we had. So I looked up the car wash on Google, and it had a phone number, and I called it, and it was, I kid you not, Josh, a fax machine.
Okay. Like the fax picked up immediately?
The fax picked up, and I got the screaming sound in my ear.
Okay.
So I don't have any other recourse. Like, there's no indicator of who the name of the owner is. There's no email address or anything like that. So now that we're in the 21st century, also on the same site where I found the phone number and that there was no email address, it was like, would you like to post a review of this place? Did you do business with them recently? I was like,
oh, would I?
Yes, I do. So I gave them a 1-star review. I posted a photo of my tire, and I told them to go screw themselves, but not in that kind of language. So that was the wrath of Ben Rich in this situation. Like, in the discussion with my wife, I was like, should we, go to small claims court and try to get the price of the tire back or stuff like that? And here's my bottom line assumption on this. Anyone that doesn't care enough to let this rail rest completely to crap and fall over isn't going to be responsive to a request from me to ask them to pay for my tire that they destroyed. So it's going to be tooth and nail to try to get them to pay for it. Like, they're probably already not making that much on this place to begin with. And I don't have I can't fight that fight.
I get you. Now, here's my philosophy in a situation like this. And I'm actually trying to adopt a saying that my brother said that really stuck with me, is you give them the opportunity to make it right. I mean, that seems valuable in any circumstance.
That was my first inclination.
Yeah, and that's what you try to do. You give it the phone call and all that. That's great.
And I wouldn't have like picked up the phone and started yelling at him. I'm like, hey, your car wash is a little bit ill repair and it broke my tire, and I want to give you a chance to make it right.
Yeah, I'd have been a little more irritated, but same thing. Like, you come across as, hey, I've been inconvenienced. It sucked. It's your fault. What are you going to do to make it right? And then in this circumstance, like in your shoes, if there was no response, there was no way to reach out to these people, I think I would have called in to like the local police or the FBI and said, this is clearly a front for drug laundering money. So go ahead and investigate and make this guy's life a living hell, please.
Yeah.
Because, like, seriously, it seems like in this day and age, how is it possible to have a business that provides a service for money and absolutely no accountability whatsoever? There has to be a sign somewhere on the premises with contact information at least,
But that's why things like, Google reviews and Yelp are actually kind of useful. Like, what recourse did you have before the internet with a coin-operated car wash?
Google reviews and Yelp are only useful if you check them before you use the service.
Right, and No, I did not. And who is checking it for a coin-operated car wash?
Exactly. So hopefully somebody finds your review helpful. But I think in this case, burning the place down might have been a better solution.
Yeah, well, other people are duly warned on the internet if they bother to check.
Fair enough. Ben Rich, everybody. Not burning places down.
Yeah. Although I would like to do that to the Air Force.
Ooh, let's not start that conversation.
Well, yeah, you win that. You win that one. But as I'm getting ready to go to Florida, there's one thing the Air Force does that's a microcosm example of a broader problem, and that is they're sending me down to augment the CENTCOM staff at MacDill Air Force Base in Florida, and they just consider it like this manpower pool. You know, every 6 months they get 10 new people, and they just farm them out based on their rank and background to the most appropriate job of roughly 10 jobs that they have for guys to do. And apparently, at some point in the past, they've needed one of those people to go forward to the Middle East. And so instead of trying to figure out which one that person is in advance and making them meet all the requirements, all the training requirements, all the health requirements, all of the equipment requirements, they just make all 10 people do all of that stuff.
Well, because bureaucratically, that's the easy solution. It's like, I don't really want to make this decision. Let's just make sure everybody can do it. Flexibility is the key to air power, Ben.
And you know what? If that meant I got to go get qualified on shooting the M4 our handgun, no big deal. Great, fine. I don't mind going and shooting the handgun.
You know what our handgun's called, right? Like the designation, alphanumeric.
Sorry, it's the
your primary weapon,
M9,
the weapon that you
M9.
Are supposed. There it is. That took you a long time.
Yeah. Well, I know what it is. It's a Beretta 9mm, but.
Come on, you got to know these things. The M9, the M4, the M4A1. Like, I wanted...
Well, they're getting ready to transition to a new one. I can't remember the number of it, but it's a new handgun, and this one's from, I think... I can't remember who it's from.
Well, it's super important to know these designators, because when I went downrange, they asked me at one point, is there any specific equipment that you think you'll need for this deployment, and we'll see if we can get it for you. And I did a little Googling, and I found the alphanumeric designation of, so I don't know it now because it's been, like 10, 20 years since I've deployed. But I found the alphanumeric designation of the underslung rail-attached shotgun, not the grenade launcher.
I remember having this exact conversation with you.
I really wanted the underslung shotgun attachment for my assault rifle, just in case I had to shoot out a couple of door hinges. And so I went and looked up and I put that through the acquisitions process, and it got really far before somebody came back and said, "Wait, are you going to need this?" I'm like, "Maybe, you don't know," and then they denied it.
Yeah. So I didn't mind shooting the M9, and I didn't mind getting a gas mask. But this week I went to the medical clinic, and they go, "Oh, you're going to need to start getting your anthrax boosters again."
Oh, those are the worst.
Holy crap, I hate those, Josh. And I do not want to do this.
Ben, you might get anthraxed in Florida. That might happen.
Oh, so I'm going to go to Florida for 6 months, and I'm supposed to get an anthrax shot. An anthrax shot, Josh. Okay, why do you hate those, since you've gotten them as well?
Okay, so... ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who have not had to have the anthrax shot, there's a couple of reasons that I hate them. One, they don't protect against what you want. Like, the weaponized anthrax that a nation state would use against you is not what we're getting inoculated against. You're getting inoculated against a farm animal disease that they, like a cow might actually get in a third world country.
Right.
And second, like, the guy even said, "It's like, now this is going to hurt." I'm like, "Well, I've gotten shots before. It's fine." And he puts the shot in. I'm like,
"There's no shot like this one."
Yeah. He put the shot in. I'm like, "Oh, that's fine." Like, why is he telling me it's going to hurt? By the time I got to my car, I couldn't move my arm. The whole thing was just throbbing in pain.
We've all gotten immunizations all throughout our lives. There's nothing like the anthrax shot. The way I describe it is 10 seconds after they shoot you with it, it feels like someone punches you in the arm really hard, and then it doesn't stop for a half hour.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good description. I might have described it more of like a small horse kicking you, but it's bad.
It really sucks. So I think I'm going to take on the man a bit here, Josh. I think I'm going to refuse it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man, Ben Rich making waves. Everybody settle down. What are they going to do to you? What's the worst thing that they can do to you at this point?
It's pretty bad. I had an airman that got discharged for refusing the anthrax shot back in the early 2000s.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Ugh, man, they will get rid of problem children for absolutely
I'm
no
not
reason.
I'm not going to do that kind of thing, but I am going to say, hey, I'm not going to the Middle East. I'm going to Florida. So tell you what, you mark me off for everything else. Write down on my sheet that I refuse an anthrax shot. And if when I get to Florida, they decide they want to forward deploy me to the Middle East, I'll go down to the clinic and get it.
That's that's not going to work.
Well, I wouldn't even be trying, except I talked to a guy who did it last year, and he did that exact thing, and it worked.
Oh. Okay, so you got insider information that this might be a sneaky way through.
Sometimes he's a better sweet talker than me or whatever, but yeah.
Mr. almost got talked into getting braces for another 6 months. Yeah, he's probably a little more forceful than you are.
Yeah. Anyway, so
well, good luck with your trying to get out of required training for pre-deployments. You need to be prepared if you're going to go downrange, sir. People, you asked us a bunch of questions. Ben solicited these questions about a month ago. We got a bunch back on Facebook and the Reddit and direct text messaging and face-to-face from some of our listeners. Thank you to all listeners that did send us questions. Now, if you don't care one iota about what Ben and I think, well, then I would encourage you to stop listening to the podcast. But this is your chance. We're going to do the middle of the show, transition to our main meat and potatoes topic.
So we'll call this the first Bad at Magic Q&A session. So listeners have asked questions. We've captured your questions, and we are going to do our best to give you some answers. Some serious, some not so serious.
Okay.
Here we go.
More disclaimers. We don't necessarily stand behind anything that we say ever, because this is a podcast about two guys talking, and I can say whatever I want. Two, I'm going to go with First Amendment and Fifth Amendment as appropriate, just as a blanket statement across everything that I'm going to say here. And three, spoilers for all the Star Wars movies. That's probably just going to happen.
Okay. So one of our listeners on Facebook has been listening to the program for a while, obviously, because we haven't done a book review in a few episodes. And they ask, we know that Josh prefers fiction and Ben prefers nonfiction, but what is Josh's favorite nonfiction book and what is Ben's favorite fiction book? So I'll let you go first.
No, put me on the spot. Oh, no, I didn't have any time to do my research. No, actually, I have this one kind of off the top of my head. So I don't read a ton of nonfiction, and when I do, I'm trying to read something that's educational, that's deliberately boring because I want to better myself. But there was one. It is pretty horrible. Why I read a lot of fiction. But there was one nonfiction book that I picked up probably years ago that I really very much enjoyed, and it was Ghost in the Wires, and it's like an autobiography, pseudo-autobiography of Kevin Mitnick, who used to be the number one wanted hacker in the world for some amount of time in the 80s and 90s. And it just talks about some of the hijinks and the situations that he got into. Now, this is why I wishy-washy on the autobiographical portion of it, because the stories that he tells they sound very this is a situation that you could find yourself in, but the way that they play out sounds very after 2 beers at the bar and no, I'm telling you, the fish was this big kind of thing. But a lot of it was just really interesting about just how 80% of his career was just social engineering, just being a smooth talker and being able to convince people. He has this great story about how he found I don't know if it was a social security office or if it was just a government works building in some small town in some backwoods state, in the middle of nowhere, and convinced the people that worked in this little government office that he was a private investigator and that he needed to go through some public records that were available. And while he was in there going through basically anything that he wanted to unsupervised, he found a ream of pre-printed, pre-sealed, pre-signed birth certificates with blank names, dates, and addresses on them.
Wow.
Yeah, and so he just shoved a stack of them into his briefcase on the way out and had fake identities for the rest of his life.
Huh. Interesting. Well, maybe we'll put that one on the docket to read and do a book review of at some point. I'd be interested in that one.
It was very interesting in how, if you know the systems that basically the modern world is built on, that they can be very easily exploited because they're managed by people.
So your favorite nonfiction book is Ghost in the Wires by Kevin Mitnick?
I don't know if he wrote it. I don't know if he's the author. I had some ghostwriter, but yes. Ghost in the Wires. It's about Kevin Mitnick. I don't know who wrote it.
Okay. All right. So my favorite fiction book. I approach this one in a different way because I don't want to go. I don't want to support the assumption that I dislike that I hate fiction, or I've always hated fiction. I'd say I've grown impatient with it as I've gotten older. Mostly because it's like I've started to be able to read the code in the Matrix, if that makes sense.
You've mentioned that before. You can kind of see what the author's going for, and it takes all the illusion away from you.
Yeah, and then I'm reading it in this kind of meta way that takes me out of it. So I went back and just thought, what have been some of my favorite fiction books in the past? When I was a child, it was The Trumpet of the Swan by E.B. White, classic, the author of Charlotte's Web. But this one was about a swan that couldn't honk, and how he compensated for that by learning to play the trumpet. Beautiful classic. If you're looking for books to read to your kids, I recommend this one.
This sounds like an 8-page, like big pictures, large text kind of book that I would read to my 5-year-old for bedtime.
No,
but that's okay. Longer
chapter book, like Charlotte's Web.
I don't see how like that's a lot of plot for, and then he learned how to play a C sharp, and his world opened up.
It's a great book. I still remember all the details quite vividly, but recommend that one. So
interesting.
Then once I got to 8th or 9th grade, I remember I was kind of looking to, I didn't realize it, but I was looking to grow out of the E.B. White stage of my life. And I was in the middle school library, and I had one of those great librarians that hopefully everyone has at some point in their life, that realizes that books aren't for quietly sitting on the shelf and never being read, but are for, expanding the minds of students. And I was kind of wandering aimlessly through the library on one of my periods, and she goes, "Are you looking for something to read?" I was like, "Yeah." And she said,
"No, I'm in the library."
Well, she's like, "Can I recommend this?" And she took me over to the fantasy section, and she handed me The Sword of Shannara by Terry Brooks. He wrote this the year I was born, but it was kind of it's known as a milestone in the community, where it kind of took a lot of the ideas and approach of someone like J.R.R. Tolkien, but kind of made it more accessible. And it was thick. It was like 700 pages, and I think I was like really intimidated at first, but I devoured it, and then I read everything else he read, and then I spent the next like 5 years just mainlining fantasy novels.
So that's what turns you off, is you started with the hard stuff, and then once you chewed through it all, like all of these random serial authors just don't get it done for you anymore.
Well, you know how these rumors are on the internet, but I'm hearing that perhaps this could be the next like Game of Thrones, that he's in talks with Hollywood producers to create some series based on his books. So
you go ahead and you can shut your mouth right now, because Wheel of Time is in production. They have full cast. They are in filming. It is coming out on Amazon next calendar year. People, don't even call me the first date that
That'll
sucker
be
airs.
Exciting.
I'm gonna take time off of work to watch that show.
So I gave those fantasy books as a child and as a teenager so much leeway, and as an adult I just don't have patience for them anymore. Like, you've gotten me to read like one or two of the Wheel of Time books and one or two Brandon Sanderson books, and I read them and I kind of get it, but I'm not like pulled into the extent where I want to read the next one. However, there's one author that can do that to me every time. John Grisham. I don't know why. It's his writing style. It's his content. Maybe it's my penchant for always being willing to try new things. But man, his books suck me in. I think he's written 36 books, and I think I've read maybe 30 of them. And whenever a new one comes out, like if I'm traveling and I see it on the on the newsstand in the airport, I grab it and read it.
See, I've never read a John Grisham book. Does he get into the nitty-gritty of the subject matter that he's dealing with?
Absolutely, and I love it.
I figured that's what it was.
He's an attorney at heart, and sometimes he strays from that, and he's talking about baseball or what it's like to live in Italy. But my favorite books of his are the ones where it's just like some tort lawyer who gets dragged into some case against some corrupt corporation or something like that, and it's just fantastic. Probably. If I had to pick one, I'll say The Partner, which came out back in 1997. But they're all good.
Wow, I want to know more about this librarian. Did you ever see this librarian again? Was that did you go in and see that librarian one time? They hand you a novel that changed your life, and then they were never seen again.
Wouldn't it be awesome if I went back in and asked for her by name, and they're like, "Who?
Who are you talking about?" Yeah. Oh, Grace hasn't worked here for 50 years since she passed. Something like that. If you tell this story again, that's how you gotta couch it. Because this person sounds like the wand dealer in Harry Potter. It's like let's find the one for you, and just goes right up to a box, knows nothing about you, doesn't even ask you what kind of book you want, and just like, this is what you need.
That's why I said I hope everyone has a person like this in their life at some point. Maybe not necessarily a librarian, but, you know, a teacher or a mentor of some sort that just kind of really understands magic.
Or some kind of helpful ghost, apparently.
Yeah. So. All right. Let's go to our next question.
Okay.
So a Reddit user asked, what are some cliches of Magic the Gathering players in the Magic the Gathering scene and world that are true and not true?
Oh, okay. I've got one that is absolutely true that people need to be aware of if they want to dabble into the harder MTG scene. And this is one that my wife will appreciate because she was not prepared for it when she first came across the MTG scene. And that is, unfortunately, the net average, let's say, hygiene level of the people that play it is much lower than you would expect of adult people in this world.
I like the way you express that as a net average because, you know, it doesn't mean there aren't outliers in both directions anywhere you go. But
dude, I shower twice a day. I wear deodorant, like I almost put it on before I go back to bed because I just want to feel fresh. And like I feel gross and greasy if I haven't showered in at least 12 hours. But that said, there are some venues that I've gone to for MTG tournaments, Ben, that a wall, just a solid, almost visible wall of BO just hits you so hard in the face as you go in. And the scary thing is, like everything else, you go nose blind to it after 5 minutes and you forget that everyone in this room reeks.
Yeah, so I actually had an experience once where I got to a new venue in England that was in this beautiful town named Bath, and it was in this historic bookstore, and there's this cafe on the second story, and we're talking like Georgian architecture, like right out of a Jane Austen novel, and literally out of a Jane Austen novel because the Jane Austen Museum's right around the corner. Like that. I'm playing Magic in this kind of setting, and I walk in and I still get the wall of BO. And I think I didn't know anyone yet, and I kind of maybe assumed American culture. And I'm like, honestly, people, do Magic players anywhere know how to take a bath? And in America, people would have just laughed that off. But one of the guys in that group I later ended up becoming friends with, after we'd been friends for about a year, reminded me of that I'd said that.
Ooh. Well, I mean, good. Did he change his ways? Did it go to heart?
He wasn't one. He had very good hygiene. But
that makes sense.
But he remembered that I had insulted the people when I didn't know them, which is kind of breaking the British rules. You can't insult people until you know them. You haven't earned the right yet.
Well, I know them now, and I'm going to insult them more to their face. Bobby, you smell bad.
Okay, so that one's true. There's some other stereotypes, you know, like living in their mother's basement, or they just game all day and night. And I think one of the reasons I've been able to find so many good friends in the Magic community is because that one is kind of an outlier. Mostly it's guys like you and me that just have a regular job and just need an outlet 1 or 2 nights a week to just go hang out with some other guys and do something fun.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
They are, by and large, Magic players are just normal people. They're not super introverted nerds that like can't function in normal day-to-day society. They are just normal people. Yeah.
Now, there is one stereotype that kind of goes along with what you were saying that I want to say is funnily true. And I'll put a link in the show notes. There was this notorious incident where some guy had gone to a Grand Prix, which is where, you know, several thousand Magic players all get together and play at the same event. And it was at one of the events where you just inherit a bunch of folding tables and folding chairs from whatever the event organizer is. And this guy started to notice that a lot of these guys were overweight and they wore too small of gaming t-shirts, and there was a noticeable gap between the top of their shirt and the bottom of their pants, and when they'd sit down in these folding chairs, there'd be visible plumber crack. So what he started to do was walk around the venue, and every time he found a new incident of plumber crack, he'd take a selfie with it, and then he made like a Tumblr and posted it on the internet, and I think he got like 15 of these, like smiling with somebody's butt crack.
Yeah, and there's one that's gone viral where he's got like his fingers together in a very thoughtful
pose. That's it.
Pose.
That's the one.
Yep.
What you don't know is that he went so viral that it got back to Wizards of the Coast, and he was banned for life from those kinds of events. So if that guy's ever seen it at Magic the Gathering Grand Prix, he will get escorted from the premises.
That's ridiculous. That is absolutely not his fault.
Well, I don't know. Is that like the male equivalent of an upskirt? He was like taking photos of guys' butt cracks and posting them on the internet against their knowledge and will.
I don't know. Butt cracks are kind of a weird no man's land of, is this obscene or is it not? Because let's not forget, there are women's bathing suits that are 100% like just, all right, let's just say it.
No,
thongs.
they're everything but butt crack.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's. Oh, you got me. Fair enough. But like seriously, like this is one of those things in society where we're kind of okay with it. Like it happens, but we try to avert our eyes, kind of thing.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. So this one's from another Reddit user, and it's about you. And they say, Josh, when you left the military, why did you go back to school to study accounting rather than find a job in computer science?
Oh, Reddit user. So you make it sound like I had a master plan. And, you know, looking back, I'd like to say, like, I had the 5-year plan all laid out. And, like, no, that is not what happened. So I left the military, and then there was this 4-year gap before I started getting my master's degree in accounting. And during that 4 years, like the first 6 months of it, I did pursue hard, like a computer science-y type job. Like I had a friend that worked at Intel at one point that was trying to get an interview down there. And I don't know if it was, like, nothing lined up, right? And at the time, I was still very much in the mindset that why isn't the world paying me what it owes? I don't get it. So I was just young and immature, and I feel like I've matured a lot in this time. But at one point, I did get a job with GoDaddy doing what they said they hired me to do, consulting. What they hired me to do, and I didn't realize, was phone tree. No, not phone tree. I was in a call center, basically.
Oh.
But this was the prestigious one. This was the consulting call center. I'm like, oh, okay, so people are going to call and want help and talk to them.
You'd be like tier 2 or tier 3 support.
That's what I was expecting. They said, well, yes, except they don't call us. We call them. I'm like,
oh, no.
I'm sorry, excuse
me? You were sales.
These are outbound calls to customers that we already have, and your job is to talk about their business and see if any of our other products would help facilitate. Like, oh, God, I'm a salesman. Let me tell you, Ben, my skill set is not in sales. I was really, really bad at that job. Like, and they said, oh, you can make all of this money. And mathematically, yes, I could have made all that money if I was a much better salesman. What I ended up doing, like, I kid you not, I would call these people and start talking to them about their business. And the few people that actually did open up, and I would get into their account and be like, oh, well, actually, the last guy that you talked to set you up with like 3 things that are redundant. You actually don't need any of this stuff. And,
you were Bob Parr from The Incredibles.
oh. Ben, I was getting nasty emails because if you refunded like people's products,
Bob, experts.
If you refunded people for stuff, they would take it out of the bonus of the person who sold it to them in the first place.
Whoa.
And so, yeah, people were sending me nasty emails like, what are you doing? And I'm like, dude, you sold him 3 email plans. What do you expect me to do? I had set this precedent that so
they're penetrating the bureaucracy.
I worked there for 6 months, and in those 6 months, I was already slated to like move up into like their legitimate tier 2 support for like server stuff, and I processed way more returns than I processed in sales, and I was easily the most knowledgeable person about the products that we had on the team because I actually understood how the internet worked and what the things that we were selling to people were.
Yeah.
But it was soul crushing. Like I just could not handle that job.
But didn't you realize though that maybe you just kind of I don't know, just moved in at the wrong tier and you just need to give it another chance? Like what made you decide to completely change?
Yeah, my impatient, irrational younger self. Just like I'm not being instantly gratified. This is ridiculous. And so that's when I started my own pool business, which is a complete, I would say, almost 180 degrees from what I was doing in the tech industry. But, I mean, I did really well at that. Like, in 1 year, I had a fully functional, full route. I was, making, I'm not going to say great money, but I was making enough money to sustain our lives here in the house that we have. Yeah. I was growing my customer base. I started, I actually wrote some custom software on the side. Yeah. Which is funny because the platform that I was using, I bought at GoDaddy with the employee discount, which at the time was something about, it was like 90% off for employees, Ben. So it's like, oh yes, sir, name. I do want this domain name and this dedicated hosting server for 10 years, please, and just tie that sucker down.
Listeners, if any of you have pool businesses, we'll hook you up with Josh's software.
Oh jeez, I counted the other day. I have 6 paying customers. It's a good product, I swear. Anyway.
It's very specialized. I'm sure those 6 people appreciate it.
I'm sure they did. I liked the pool business. I like being able to set my own schedule. I like being able to have a finite amount of work. I got up in the morning. I knew, all right, this is what I have to accomplish today, and then I'm done. But what I didn't like was I knew I could see the ceiling. Like, this is my upper bound. Me as a single person, this is the amount of work that I can do, which means this dictates my income. Now, I could grow the business and start hiring people, but that introduces HR and quality control and training and dealing with people, which not a fan of because I'm a super introvert. And like I don't think I made the assessment at the time that I don't think I had the skill set to grow the business to the level that I wanted it to be. And so I looked for alternatives. And I had been like, my brother-in-law was in finance at the time. My sister-in-law was an accountant for years and years and did taxes. And all of them, every time they saw me, told me like, you would make a great accountant. And so I was like, you know what? There's infinite room of growth in accounting and finance, and like maybe I can just check it out and see what it's like. Ben, I have never been happier. Like I am so like you. I make so many spreadsheets every day. It's just great. People hand me these laundry lists of numbers, and then I get to interpret them. Like, now let me tell you what you've done wrong with this list of numbers. Like it's just so fantastic.
Yeah. All right. So is your answer to the original question because I was impatient?
The answer to the original question is because I was too impatient to, like, if I had stayed at GoDaddy for another 6 months, I have no doubt in my mind that I would have been moved up to a different job in a different department. I would have been much happier. And then my experience as a manager would have started kicking in. Like, if I had just put in the time, like, I would have climbed that ladder very quickly. And I understand now, looking back, I understand that would have been very quickly. At the time, I was frustrated that I wasn't, like, in charge of all these hundreds of people after 6 months. Like, it was ridiculous. How dare they?
Yeah, that's very consistent with what I know about you. All right, let's go on to another question. Completely different kind of question here. So this is from another Reddit user, and they're asking us and potentially suggesting a future segment on the show. What are your favorite and least favorite commercial jingles? What makes them good and bad? New segment, bad at jingles.
No. Vetoed, blackballed. There will be no bad at jingles because there is no such thing as a good jingle.
Really?
No, not at all. I'm going to go ahead and answer this one first, and I'm going to.
I did some research.
Oh, of course you did. I'm going to taint your answer because,
all right, go ahead.
Like the way that you read fiction and you read it in a very meta way, and you kind of see through the Matrix code. I feel that way about commercial jingles. I'm like, they're making these catchy on purpose because they're trying to plant it into my top of mind awareness so I will buy this thing that may or may not actually make any utility in my life. So there's 2 examples that drive me nuts to this day because I thought to myself, I try to take it seriously when I first read this question. I'm like, okay, what are some of the jingles that I like and the most and like the least? And my first criteria was, well, obviously, I can't research it. Like, if they're my most or least favorite, they would come to the top of my mind right now, right? Like, I would know them. All of the examples that I could come up with immediately made me furious that I knew them. And one of them, the first one is the Folgers. Like, everybody knows that one. The best part of waking up. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I know that jingle to this day. Ben, I don't watch TV. I have streaming services. I don't listen to the radio.
Do you drink Folgers coffee?
Okay, this is what drives me nuts. I have known that jingle for decades, since I was a kid. I started drinking coffee this calendar year. Like I have, and it has never been Folgers. It's like never. So why does this exist in my brain, taking up valuable space that could be better served as a phone number for a Virginia law attorney?
You feel like they're using like psychological chemical weapons when it's not justified.
This is a memory aid in every study course that you'll ever attend. It's like, oh, try to set it to music or try to set it to lyrics of a song, because for some reason, something about the human brain likes to associate words. This is why you know the words to songs that you haven't heard in years, but you can't remember what you had for breakfast 2 days ago.
All right, what was the other one?
delightfully named product Head On, which was some kind of migraine remedy a few years back.
But that wasn't a jingle. That was just an annoying commercial.
Head On, apply directly to the forehead.
That's
Head
the
On,
one.
apply directly to the forehead. And just say it like a robot 4 times and show your product, and somebody taking this glue stick and just rubbing it all over their face. Does anyone even use
that? Because not only did you have to have an annoying ad campaign that stuck in people's minds, but you also had to have a worthwhile product that would work so that they would want to use it again once they tried it the first time, and I don't think it was.
Why would anybody on earth buy an FDA pseudo-approved, over-the-counter topical anesthetic? Like, this sounds like a terrible idea. Yeah. All over the place. Like, if I get it on my hand, does my hand go numb? Like, there's questions behind this product that I don't want answered.
Well, Folgers coffee's still around.
Well, Folgers is, right. But Head On, I have not heard from them.
So I kind of had the same criteria as you. I thought I had the same initial reaction. Like, if they are good jingles, then I should just be able to recall them off the top of my head. And then I thought, no, not really. But sometimes, like, I know one, like, I'll know it's a good jingle. Like, I'll see the product in the store and it'll come in my head, or I'll have it in my house and I'll sing it when I'm using it. You know, like whenever I get my kids come home from trick or treating and I'm going through their candy and stealing stuff, and I pick up a Kit Kat bar. You know the song.
Yeah, I do know the song. I'm not going to sing it because that's just going to illustrate the lag between our recordings. But go ahead.
I don't know if that makes me more or less likely to buy a Kit Kat bar, but give me a break. So that's an example of one. But I realized that my life has transformed so much that I don't consume these the way they're intended to anymore. And I was thinking about how I consume them in a new way. I have 100% stopped watching any form of broadcast television for at least 10 years. And so I don't get the main line for those things. So I'm out of the loop. Like, all of my stuff is at least 10 years old. Except for a few that kind of leak through, like, for instance, Liberty Mutual has all their ads that are, like, in between YouTube videos. And their stupid jingle is, Liberty, Liberty, Liberty. Like, I know that one, and it's stupid, but it definitely sticks in my head. So that's an example of a bad one. It's bad because I don't like it, and it doesn't make me more likely to buy their product.
Yeah, but it's perfect because you remembered it. You see, this is the thing. Jingles are not designed to be a good thing. They are designed to stick in your brain whether you like it or not.
Okay, so it made me think of Disney Pixar's Inside Out. And there's that great scene where there's the memory janitors, and they're down there in front of the memory bank, and they grab the one, they're like, oh, I love this one. It's the Triple Dent Gum. Triple Dent Gum will make you smile. Triple Dent Gum will last a while. And they're like, haha, send that one up to the front office just for kicks. And they stick it in the hole, and it goes back up, and all of a sudden they start singing it, and the angry guy's like, oh, why is this happening?
We send this up there like 20 times a day just to mess with them. Yeah. That was a hilarious scene, and I do love it. And that's the problem. It's because of the stupid memory janitors. We'll never throw these jingles away, Ben. Like, I need this space.
They're like, throw out the piano lessons and the Spanish lessons, but keep the Triple Dent Gum commercial.
I also like their comment. Oh, what are these phone numbers? Oh, we don't need these. They're all on the phone. Chuck them.
Yeah, exactly. But I want to end this segment with a good one. In kind of a melancholy way. As I was looking through these, I came across the Toys R Us jingle. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. There's a million toys at Toys R Us that I can play with. And that just brings back happy memories and lovely thoughts. And I enjoy going to Toys R Us my whole life. And whenever I'd go there, I would sing the song and smile. And even now when I sing it, it makes me smile. And it makes me sad inside that Toys R Us has gone out of business.
When I was a kid, if we ever went to Toys R Us, I was always sad that we couldn't buy all the things in the store. And then when I went back as an adult, I realized I can't buy anything in this store. Sad memories. You're right.
All right. Reddit user Josh Fleshman says, whatever happened to the Bad at Magic Fitness Challenge?
Yeah, what did ever happen to that Bad at Magic Fitness Challenge?
This is a stupid question. Next.
Oh. Actually, I agree with you now. Because, so when I wrote that question down, it was like weeks ago, before I had weighed myself after I can't. So, Ben, I'm not going to lie. Like, I live in Arizona, and I was doing a good job running for, like, right up through July. And then we hit August, and it was, like, 108 degrees by 9 o'clock in the morning. And so, like, I would have to get up every day at 5 to run, and it was still already 90-something degrees.
Oh, geez.
And, buddy, I fell off the wagon hard, and I fell face first into root beer floats every night. So I am not in a good place for the Bad at Magic Fitness Challenge right now.
Me either, but I'm well postured because I have a very good success rate of losing weight when I'm deployed. And I'm going to be gone for 6 months, and I'm going to lose a bunch of weight. But here's the thing. I realized what my problem with the fitness challenge was, and it's not the partnering and the support and all that kind of stuff. My problem is that the measuring your neck and your waist was just too much overhead for this. I couldn't do it well myself. I needed my wife to be involved, and just the coincidence of finding the measuring tape and having her there and not having my shirt tucked in or whatever all at the same time, it just never happened.
Oh, well, first of all, you're supposed to be measuring like pre-breakfast, post-shower. Totally nude.
Exactly.
That's the only way to get this
You just
done.
increase the amount of overhead on it. But no, I bought myself a Bluetooth scale that automatically syncs up to my phone, and I'm taking that with me when I deploy, and it will be super easy, and it'll be great. I'm gonna lose a ton of weight.
You know what I've heard is that if you want real good results, is you take those scales that hook up to your phone, and you also have it hook up to your Twitter account. So every time you weigh yourself every week, it like posts a tweet that says what your weight is. That really keeps you on the ball.
You're the devil. I'm not that guy. Okay, next. All right, this one of our listeners says, "What would the other podcast hosts do if they won the lottery?" I like this one, so I'm gonna go first, okay? And then you can say what I would do if I won the lottery.
Yeah, so we're speculating on what the other person. Now, I need to know the dollar threshold. Like in your mind, how much money is the other person winning?
Let's say something modest. We're not talking about the Powerball here. Let's just say the state lottery. So first of all, there's a bad assumption in this question that is that whoever asked this doesn't realize that gambling is against my religion, and that buying the lottery tickets are considered gambling, and we don't do it.
Listeners, I hope I just rolled my eyes so hard that you could hear it. Please, go ahead, Ben.
So already the assumption that I win the lottery is kind of weird. But if you won the lottery, okay, so listeners, Josh has had this really fascinating penchant for quirky hobbies the whole time that I've known him. I remember the first time I realized this was when one day Josh shows up at work and he had, what was it? He had like this arm gauntlet that he'd made out of wire and turned into chainmail. He's like, "Ben, I got this new hobby I'm trying. I'm making chainmail." I'm like, "You doing what?" He's like, "Yeah, I just got raw wire and I bend it into circles and I link them all together and braid them into patterns and I make chainmail." I'm like, "Who does that? Who makes chainmail?" I do, apparently. So you've done this all throughout the time I've known you. You've made chainmail and you've done wood carving and you built like this home video game console and you just had like these quirky hobbies. So if you won the lottery, you wouldn't stop doing that, or maybe even do it more, but I think the projects that you undertake would increase in magnitude. You'd have better tools to build and better materials, and you would do something really awesome.
I think like you've actually hit the nail right on the head, because I told my parents this one time that the first indication that you're going to get that I have won the lottery is when the contractors roll into the back of your large property lot and start building a giant shop that you're not aware of.
Yes.
And I've told them, like, I would just have space. I would need like 2,000 square feet of open, air-conditioned, well-powered space to do stuff. Yes.
All right, your turn.
Okay, my turn. So again, just the state lottery, not the Powerball thing. Ben, I'd like to say that you would buy like one of those hardcore, super souped up 4-wheel drive, like off-roading Baja desert racing trucks and just go hog wild. But that's not you. That's not who Ben Rich is. Ben Rich is the person that makes everything better in his whole life. And like we discussed a little bit the last time, like he's just the level of lame that you want in a best friend. So I know what you would do. The first thing that you would, like everything that you would think a responsible adult would do, like the key word here is responsible. You would pay off all your debt, all of it. Like the house would be paid off, any car loans, any credit cards would all be paid off, first of all. Second of all, I think maybe then you would take a little bit out for what you would feel guilty about it. Some of it would then go to buy your family a new vehicle, and it would be a totally practical vehicle. It would be like a high capacity, multiple passenger, probably like a van. It might be a super fancy van this time because you won the lottery, but it would still be a van. And third, you would then put like the rest of it away in equal measure for all of your kids to both go to college and do their mission. No problem, hands down. And if you had any of it left, the $15 that you had left over, you might buy some magic cards with.
Nice. You also were very accurate. You admitted the fact that I would probably tithe to the church first.
Well, was that just not like an assumption?
Assumed, yeah.
They're like, okay, so whatever it's that math that you do. It's like, oh, when you win the lottery, but you're only going to get 55% of it because taxes are going to take out the top. But then actually you're only going to get 45% because that top 10% goes straight to the church. And Ben Rich is the kind of guy that would tithe on the gross and not the net that he got from that stupid lottery winning.
I'm going to plead the Fifth Amendment on that one. Okay, so let's go on to the next question. This one I think might have been intended to be a bit cheeky or facetious, but I like it and I want to take it serious. The question is, why does Josh get all the stories wrong?
Oh, so this question in particular may or may not have come from somebody that I spend every waking hour of my life with. She's female. And a lot of my stories involve her. She will remain nameless. Let's call her Nancy. So, Nancy likes to point out that in the podcast, I like to tell stories that involve Nancy. And sometimes Nancy was the first party in these stories. And I always tell them wrong from her perspective. She would always, she'll listen to the podcast and be like, that's not what happened. And then proceed to explain to me what actually happened. And then I will proceed to explain to Nancy how, but my version was better. My version was way cooler. But this is an ongoing, kind of back and forth that I've had with Nancy since I've known her, is that I like to tell stories. Like, I'm big into stories, and I like to tell stories. I like to read stories. Stories are important. And so you have to understand the different aspects of what makes stories good. You've got to have, your good characters. You got to have plot arcs. You've got to have 3-act transitions.
Right. In real life, it doesn't always give you all that on a silver platter.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes maybe if details get embellished or if a backstory that didn't really exist gets put in to make everything in context better, maybe it happens. For example, classic scenario. The first time Nancy and I dated, I asked her out. She remembers very differently than I do. She remembers me very awkwardly approaching her and asking her a hypothetical question, hands folded, eyes down. If I were to ask you out, what would you say? And then my memory of the event is I was on a horse, I was shirtless, and I think there was a sword involved. So clearly there is some disparity between our versions of the story.
Yeah, I'm sure you've retold that one, and it's stayed the same every time you've told it.
Very consistent across the board.
Yeah. So I'd written down my answer, and I said, and I quote, because it's funnier and more interesting to get it wrong.
This is Brandon Sanderson's Law Zero.
That's right. The zeroth law.
That's right.
Because never let the other laws get in the way of that which is awesome.
That's right. If it makes the story better, then, I don't see why there should be so much complaining.
Okay, now I know we've kind of been very anonymous on these questions, but I want to disclose the identity of this one. This is from your 8-year-old son, Carter. I love this question. He said, I assume he said Daddy, if Daddy made a video essay like Ben did about the Nike Air Max 95, what would it be about? I dig this question so much.
Well, this might not be a word-for-word translation. It was more along the lines of, what if you made a video like Ben did? It's so if I created, and then I elaborated. This is what he meant.
Okay.
And it was a very pointed question. And honestly, my wife and I, whose name is not Nancy, were very shocked that it came out of our son at the dinner table. And I took it very seriously. What do I feel strongly enough about that I would put the time, effort, research, and just sheer willpower into making? Because if you haven't seen Ben's Nike Air Max 95, ode or sonnet or love story, you need to go watch it. This man seriously, loves those shoes so much, Alicia should be worried about
it. Yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes if you haven't watched it
yet. You should. It's great.
So what would you make one about?
And I honestly, I was thinking, turning this over in my mind for the whole week, trying to figure out what do I feel strongly enough about that I would make a video like that. And the only thing that I can really come up with, and this is so nerdy, Ben, it's so nerdy, it was the realization that I had many years ago that all of life is dictated by the mechanics of the system that you are currently in. And that applies to everything. Like, it applies to the voting system. Like, the reason we have the political structure that we have today is because of the mechanics of the system, not necessarily the people that were involved, not necessarily like the elections that we've had, but the actual raw mathematical mechanics of how it works, how we vote, who we vote for. Like, all of it feeds into why the system is the way it is.
You know the scene in the Truman Show where Truman says, "When I grow up, I want to be an explorer."
And
the teacher pulls down the map and whacks it with the ruler and says, "Too late, the whole world's already been discovered." Josh, someone's already made this video.
Yeah, well, that video for voting, but I'm talking about, mine would be a little more abstract, like trying to explain and relate that to everything, because you can apply the exact same logic to why the greatest and the worst people in the military don't stay in the military. Like, why do the best minds in the military always bail out after however many years? Why?
We're going to give this the full treatment on Bad Magic because I wrote a paper about it, a 12-page academic peer-reviewed paper on this subject
about the acquisition or the people and the personnel in the military.
Yes.
Right, but this is what I'm trying to say. Like, while it applies to every single situation everywhere across the planet, like, that's the realization. The story is like understanding the mechanics, the math, and like the just the sheer mathematical outcomes of the structures that you are creating impacts you. For another example, my boss recently was talking about implementing, like, she's hypothetically pitching to me, what if I implemented some kind of a profit-sharing scheme? I'm like, okay, well, what would it look like? And she starts explaining all of these numbers and metrics and how she would do it. And her baseline assumption was that a person would have to meet this specific target number. And I stopped her and I'm like, okay, now you understand that by making this whole system revolve around that number, you are now actively incentivizing all of the behavior based on that from this point forward.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter what you are doing, what kind of behavior you want, people are going to base their behavior on this. And just trying to get that across, like, this is a big deal. Like, you need to make sure that this number is airtight and that's really what you want.
Yeah. I love it. I love that thought. There was this, I think we talked about this in the scarcity episode, about how when British explorers realized that there was this cache of dinosaur bones in China, and they wanted to have the locals help them find dinosaur bones, and they decided to pay the locals based on the number of pieces of bone that they provided. And so the locals were finding whole bones and then smashing them into pieces and selling them the individual pieces.
Exactly. That is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. The rules and the system that you put into place will drive people's decision-making after that. And sometimes, like, we try to put on these Band-Aids without recognizing what the foundation problem is, and it's these systems.
Yeah. All right. Well,
my video essay would be very boring. It would have a lot of math, and nobody would watch it.
Josh, I don't know. Okay, I'm going to put a link to this. There's this landmark paper published, I think, in like 2000 or 1999 by Wired Magazine called The Long Tail. It was transformational for me to read this article, and it's still out there on the internet. I highly recommend it. And it basically talks about how the internet has provided a way for anyone out there that's interested in something to find it. And that the more things that you can come up with, there's someone out there that's interested in it, and the internet eliminates the coincidence of being on the same part of the earth as that person.
I heard a comedian say it in a much funnier way. It's like, the best part about the internet is that if you want to dress in a stormtrooper costume from head to toe and go do a flash mob to Thriller in downtown wherever, like, before you were just a weirdo. Now you can find 50 other people like this and like, yes, let's do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't think your video would be as without audience as it is. Although I am a bit disappointed at my ability to find the other Air Max 95 fans out there. But I'm still looking. So,
they're out there, Ben. There are people that have weird shoe fetishes that you do. They exist.
Well, I have one other, but I'll get to that later. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our questions that we got on Reddit. And one of our users on Reddit said, what things do you purchase that are worth the extra costs, and what things aren't worth the extra costs?
So as I become a more mature... I'm sorry, I'm already jumping in. Like, do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
I'd written down some, but if you got an answer and you don't need the extra time, go for it.
I don't need the extra time. So I was thinking about this one, and what I realized was that it's not so much like specific products, but a whole category of products. Because I started thinking to myself, what do I care about and what do I not care about when it comes to brand names? And as I'm becoming, the person that has to pay for stuff and go to the grocery store, I'm realizing more and more that things I don't care about are name brand food products. Like, this can of peas costs 10 cents more than this can of peas, and frankly, they're both going to taste like canned peas. So why should I pay 10 cents more?
Why are you buying canned peas? Gross.
Well, I actually like the canned vegetables better. Like, my family has switched to almost exclusive the frozen microwavable pouches. Like, it's not all canned vegetables anymore, but I like some canned vegetables. I think canned spinach tastes better than fresh steamed spinach, for example, which is weird, but I like it. Anyway, so like food, like the name brand generic food, I will go generic on every food product that I can find. But I'm
sorry, I can't get the image of you like Popeye breaking open canned spinach in my head now. I'm totally making that image graphic.
Yeah, just totally just rip it open and eat it right out of the can. Like, it's fine. You could heat it up if you want, but wait, why you take me down this tangent? No. Right. The things that I do care about, however, that I've realized is anything that physically attaches to my body. So clothing, socks, shoes, underwear, like all of that, there is no compromises.
You're not going to save 10 cents on a pair of socks.
No, because I've been burned too many times on like, well, these shoes are super expensive. Like, I can, like, what's the difference really between a $120 pair of running shoes and a $60 pair of running shoes? Well, I'll tell you, Ben, knee pain, iliotibial band problems, like there's problems that $60 can prevent if you spend it well. So
and if you really put that $60 in the right context and think about how many minutes of your life you spend using it and stuff like that, it's minuscule.
Oh yeah.
To not just get one that's a little bit better.
Yes, so no compromises when it comes to things that I wear that interact with my body daily.
Okay, so you don't care about name brand foods, but things that come in contact with your body.
Yeah, that's what I'm going with.
Okay. I was trying to think of more specific examples that also kind of fall into categories like that. And I did think of that same category of like a mattress is a good example of something that, you know, is just really worth it to spend on getting a good one. You don't need to get...
You've told me just such lovely tales about your Sleep Number beds that I've wanted one ever since, but I've never been able to just justify the expense, I guess. I should.
Yeah. Another one I think goes without saying is nice shoes. You know, like I think it's important to get nice shoes. But here's my next video. My 2007 Acura TL. I love that thing like nothing else. Acura, you know, when in the late 90s and early 2000s, Japanese automakers started trying to carve out luxury niches to compete with the likes of BMW and Mercedes, and Toyota spun off Lexus, and Honda spun off Acura, and started trying to create these premium markets. It mostly just didn't faze me much. I mean, I was kind of interested in this idea, but the idea of being able to afford a luxury Japanese automobile was so far outside of my reach that it was just something far in the future. Until the 2004 model year of the Acura TL came out. You can already hear me starting my next video.
I can already hear your tone of voice shifting to that loving caress that you gave the Nike Air Max.
The first time I saw one drive past me on the street, it was like the Claudia Schiffer poster. It was like choirs of angels singing, and it was just beautiful. And I thought, someday I will have that car. And that model year only lasted for 4 years, and then they completely redesigned it and ruined it. So from 2004 to 2008, Acura made this beautiful, luxurious automobile that I lusted after like no Ferrari or Lamborghini ever did. I wanted a 4-door sedan. And when I came back from Europe, I'd been getting COLA and overseas housing allowance for 5 years, and I was completely out of debt. I had 10 grand to put on a used car, and I went and found myself the nicest 12-year-old car from that model year that I could find, and it had 230,000 miles on it.
Oh, Ben.
And it is gorgeous. It's like a well-cared-for widow. So I named it after a well-cared-for widow, and I call my car Jackie. Okay,
so what's funny is you mentioned the Acura TL when you were talking about your car wash video earlier today, and like I thought to myself, I don't think I've ever heard this car before, and I Googled it, and like while you were talking, and I got the pictures, and like, yeah, it's a 4-door sedan. And I immediately blew it off and started just get back into the podcast. But like, I had no idea that you had such a love affair with this car.
You have to go back to the 2004 to 2008 model year. If you just Google Acura TL, you're looking at the wrong one. Go back to the 2004 to 2008 model
Acura TL 2004. Images. Google. Show me. Ben, this is even more of a sedan than the sedan I was looking at.
Oh, wait till my video comes out.
This is like this is the guy in the lineup that nobody ever picks. It's just the standard height, standard haircut, like immediately dismissed. Like I understand, like there is a weird like Ben. Listeners, if you don't know this, Ben is secretly like a closet car guy. Like he will go hard into car stuff, like out of nowhere. If you don't know him, but Ben, this car, come on,
actually really accurate.
But this is a sedan.
Okay. I would contend that your gut reaction to this, of looking at it and saying this is just an every sedan, I would say it isn't just an every sedan, it's the ideal every sedan.
Ooh, this is the perfect version of the most average car you've ever seen.
Yes.
Love it. We're going to have an episode about the Acura TL.
Then things that are not worth the extra cost, probably all the Apple electronics I've bought. Pre-built computers, those kinds of things. You've been trying to convince me to build my own. I get it. I've spent too much money on it just because I like... And I realize all my things fall into one category. There are certain things in my life where I've spent a lot of time in the past on these things, and I have... what's it called? The valley, where like you think you know everything, and then you find out more about something, and you realize you don't know anything.
Wisdom?
There's a name for it. Crap, I can't think of it.
That's fine.
I put it in the show notes. Anyway... Once you know more about something, you know how much you don't know.
Yeah.
And I realize this about a lot of things. Computers, cars, those kinds of things. Where I know a lot about it, and when I recognize that something's going to take up a lot of my time, I'm willing to outsource it to an expert that has access to better tools and more recent hands-on experience than me. So, I'm willing to pay for like auto repairs or a pre-built computer that comes with a warranty just because I've spent so much of my life in the past fixing cars and messing around with computers.
Well, you just painted yourself in a corner, sir, because you should listen to somebody who has more recent experience in building their own computer, and you should build your own.
But I put that in the category of things that probably aren't worth the extra cost that I'm still spending too much money on.
All right. Well, I will pester you incessantly about building your own computer. More in the future.
All right. So one of our listeners asked, how can a friendship survive all the obstacles and distance yours has? So how long did we actually live in the same location?
Let's see. I was in Virginia from 2005 until 2010-ish.
Okay. And I was in Virginia from 2005 till 2008.
So 4 or 5 years, maybe? No, maybe a little
3 years.
Less. Yeah, tops.
3 years we were in the same place, tops, and then since then it's been 12 years of us all over the world, all over the world.
Yeah, I remember one time you popped into our house in New Mexico, and it was really funny because, all right, so listeners, there's this great time when Ben texted me out of nowhere when I was still a bachelor living in Virginia and said, hey, my air conditioning died. It is super hot. It's the middle of summer. Do you mind if my family crashes at your apartment for the afternoon/evening? And Ben and I were going to be at Magic tournament that night anyway, so like, oh yeah, sure, that's fine. And I remember like everybody showed up, and I opened the door, and your children spilled into my apartment like a liquid. Like there was.
I remember you going, "Oh no, my house is not baby proof."
Well, what's funny is I thought I had child proofed it, and then immediately one of your children almost brained themselves with my iron. Like seconds later, like I thought I did a good job. Clearly, I didn't. But I was a bachelor at the time, so forgive me. But what's really funny is then, like, flash forward, God, it had to be 5 or 6 years later. I was living in my new house in New Mexico, married to Nicole, first kid on the way, and the same thing. Like, you showed up, like, you were driving through on your way somewhere and just happened to be in New Mexico and decided to take the freaking 2-hour detour to see me. And, like, you rang the doorbell, I opened the door, and your children spilled in, again, like a liquid, just filling the space that is available to them.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, and in between the lines of the two stories you just told is also me attending your destination wedding in the Bahamas, me on my mid-tour leave back in the States after I'd gone from Italy to England and I'd come home to visit my family. I took 3 days and came down and seen you in Arizona. And one time you coming up to see us in Colorado Springs when you were there for another reason.
That did happen.
I heard someone say once that that you need a few people in your life that are kind of people that if you're within 100 miles of them, you'll close the distance. And you were that kind of person for me. Aww. So like you giving the example of me, going out of my way to go through New Mexico where you were. I keep track of where you're at, of getting a passport and setting aside the money to go to your wedding in the Bahamas, or flying down from Utah to Arizona when I was on leave from England to Utah to go see you. It's not an accident that you and I are still friends. Both of us over the years have done the things to invest in our relationship.
Well, I'm very, very glad that you feel that way. And again, I feel bad over here because I feel like I haven't nearly put in the amount of effort that you have into our relationship. So there was a fun.
That's true. I don't think we would still be friends like that if it wasn't symmetrical somehow.
Well, I'm not necessarily a big believer in religion and all of those things, but I do believe hardcore in karma. And so I always feel like I'm in debt to other people that are super nice in my life. And you're one of those people in my life that is just, everything is so good about you. I feel like I just constantly owe you as much goodness back as I can give. Maybe that's part of it.
Let me tell you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, the other part is this expression that I heard years ago. I don't remember where I heard it, but I love it and I still use it to this day. Introverts don't have friends. They have extroverts that have adopted them. And I feel like that you just adopted me, and I've just been like your adopted introvert friend for your whole life.
Well, here's one way in which you reciprocate quite well. You like to take issue with sometimes with the way that, like, occasionally I'll just get a hankering and I'll, like, email someone out of the blue. I've done that to you our entire friendship. And I don't know if that's what's maintaining the connection, but while you and I were both in the Air Force, every now and then I would just get fed up with life and need somebody I knew could relate, and I would send you, like, a 10-page email of just, like, what's going on in the world and what's everything going. And after you got over the initial shock of how long it was, you'd write me back probably an equal or about, you'd reciprocate in kind. And you and I'm sure I could go back and find the record, and of the times that we weren't living close to each other or we weren't talking on the phone, we were exchanging these long emails where we're just sharing what's going on in our lives and what our future aspirations are, the kind of things that good friends do.
Oh wow, we are actually good friends. Huh, that came out of nowhere.
All right. Well, let's go on to another question then. So another one here from a listener in Arizona. Why is Josh such a wanker?
May or may not have come from a person I know in my life. May or may not.
We'll call them Nancy.
We'll call them Nancy. Watching a lot of British TV lately with a lot of British insult words. So
I want to. Can I take this one?
I was just going to suggest. I think you're the better party to answer this question.
Okay, I'll take this one because I think this one's to me. Why is Josh such a wanker? I don't know, but it's one of those two-edged swords. That's also why we love him so much.
I'm the weird guy in the sitcom that, like, oh, he's such a jerk, but he's so lovable, can't ever get rid of him.
All right, how would you describe each other in one word?
I did some research into this one.
Okay, go ahead.
I had several words and I narrowed it down. Are you ready? Earnest. Benjamin Rich is earnest. And the strict dictionary definition of earnest is resulting from or showing sincere and intense conviction. Whatever Ben does in his life, he does wholeheartedly, and it's coming from a place where either it's his moral values or his status in the relationship or his investment in the person or the object. Whatever it is that he is doing, he's putting his whole person into it, and he's just so convicted and a part of it, and just everything that he's got goes into it, and it's amazing. And I'm constantly astounded that you get any sleep at night with all of the things that you pour yourself into.
That was a very clever way to use like 70 words to answer a question where the answer is supposed to be one word. So I'm in the spirit of the question, I'm just going to give a one-word answer and say
wanker.
Nerd.
Oh, wow. This is a first. This is a first where I took something seriously and Ben blew me off. I love it. This is perfect. It's exactly what that question should be.
All right. And one of our Reddit listeners asked, what are your top 3 home appliances?
Top 3. Do you want to go first on this one?
Yes.
Okay.
So when my wife and I got married, one of our wedding presents from my parents was a KitchenAid stand mixer. And not only is that thing built like a freaking tank, but I've used it at least every week my entire life. Even when we were in England, I got a transformer so that I could run it on 220 volt power, and it's still going strong, and I love it.
I have to interject because that is number 1 on my list as well. I bought Nicole. Nicole is hardcore into baking, and I bought her a KitchenAid stand mixer probably 6 or 7 years ago, and we used that freaking thing at least twice a week.
So listeners, if you don't yet have a KitchenAid stand mixer, put that on your, whatever your wedding gift registry. And KitchenAid, if you're listening, please sponsor the show.
Man, listeners, seriously, like, oh, I don't do hardcore baking. It's because you don't have a stand mixer. Holy crap. You can make cookies in like 5 minutes. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So good. Love mine. I'll be sad the day it dies, and I'll immediately buy another one.
That's amazing. I didn't know you had a KitchenAid stand mixer. This is great.
So, my second one. This one definitely relates more to the fact that I have 6 children. In the middle of the year, all my kids are 2 years apart in age, and there's 6 of them. So whenever the birthdays all happen, then they're all the even numbers or all the odd numbers: 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So when we were right in those ages where like we had 2 or 3 kids in diapers at any one time, the amount of chaos and filth that was being produced by my house just exceeded my tolerance level on a regular basis. And I was in the market for a good wet cleaner, like a carpet cleaner. And occasionally I would rent like the ones they got in the grocery store, but I would go to the store because that wasn't satisfactory to me, because I would have to go to the store and rent it and bring it home, buy the products and run it. And I wanted one for my home. So I think I went through 2 or 3 different models of consumer grade ones that you can buy at the department store that have like neon colors on them and fancy attachments and stuff, and I was never as satisfied with those as the one I rented from the grocery store. So I finally went on the internet and looked up how much it would cost for me to just actually buy a Rug Doctor commercial quality one, and it was like $500. And I was right to the point where I was like, fine, $500, and I bought one, and I still have it, and I love it to death. It's like it's my favorite. It's awesome, and every time there's a disaster, I like, it's okay. And whenever there's someone that's like, oh, we're moving, does anyone know where I can rent a carpet cleaner? I'm like, I've got one. Yeah.
And I have used it. I have it, and I have very reasonable rates.
I just used it last week because I'm getting ready to deploy for 6 months, and I shampooed all the carpets upstairs. My whole house smells fresh and looks clean. I love it.
Why would you do that before you left and not like expect that to be done right when you get back? That's fine.
It's my Rug Doctor commercial carpet cleaner.
All right. So my second favorite has got to be, and I say this because it's a very love-hate relationship, and it's I don't even know the brand, honestly. It's our washer and dryer, because we bought them as a set, and they were fancy when we bought them. At the time, front-loading was the thing. Like, you remember, we went from top-loading washers to like, oh, no, you need a front-load washer. And then now we're switching back to top-load washers, which is irritating. But I have a front-load washer and dryer.
Yeah, it's because somehow science figured out the way to, I don't know, like, have a thing in the bottom of a washer that makes it so you don't have to have that giant pillar in the center. Because I just bought a new top-load washer, and it doesn't have the giant pillar, and it still gets the clothes clean. I don't know what they did. Figured it out.
Science. That guy should win a Nobel Prize. Anyway, you know what it is? It's a Whirlpool Duet. I know this. It's a Whirlpool Duet washer and dryer, and that's the washer is my second favorite because I love to hate it. Like, I hate the stupid thing because, like, now it's at the part of its life where it's a little finicky, where it's like, okay, well, hang on. If you're going to do heavy spin, we got to put it into eco heavy duty and then go medium spin, because that gives you the same spin, but it's not going to throw, like, the motion sensor that's a little touchy on it. Like, I just know all the little ins and outs of this thing. I've replaced the drain pump on it probably 3 times myself. I don't know why. Like, at some point, like, just buy a new washer. But, no, I know everything about this washer inside and out, and I can keep it running for, like, another year.
You don't know the brand of it, so what you're not talking about it being your top appliance. You're just talking about it being something you're endeared to.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, maybe this is sunk cost fallacy, but I've just put so much effort and time into this thing, and it's not perfect, and it wobbles a little bit on this cycle, and it's a little too loud in this particular part, but you know what? It has been around for, like, years and years. I think I've had that washer longer than my son has been alive, and it's just still washing my clothes.
Yeah, so we just replaced both our washer and dryer, and we did it. We thought we were being economical. We were like, okay, let's get a really nice, good top-end washing machine to replace the old one, because it's just had one too many. It was a Kenmore, and it was great, and it worked for years and years. And if washing machines had souls, that one has PTSD because the things it has seen and done.
That's funny.
But I just saluted it and thanked it for being a good appliance, and like Marie Kondo, it sparked joy. Thank you. And now get out. And we got the new one. And it was like a month that we lasted with this brand new top-loading washing machine that could wash about 3 times much more laundry than our dryer could now dry. And then we had to throw the dryer out too and get a new one. So they're both Kenmore. My old ones were dependable. The new ones seem to be as well. I like those. Third on my list. So this dates back to the early days of YouTube, and you probably remember these quirky, silly videos that were probably were one of the most successful early attempts at viral marketing via the internet, where some guy in a white lab coat would go into a laboratory and use a blender to blend up things that had no rightful business being inside a blender. Do you remember the brand?
I don't remember the brand, no.
Okay, I'll link to one of the classics of these. But this is from like early YouTube. They were Blendtec blenders, and he would take a Blendtec blender and like put an iPhone in it and blend it up and make like an iPhone smoothie. Or he would put in a whole chicken and a can of Coke in the can and like put them in this blender and blend them up and pour it out. He's like, look, Co-chicken, and pour it into a glass. Yeah. Anyway, it always stuck in my head, but whenever I looked one up, they cost way, way, way too much. You talk about things that are worth paying for. I have this weird category of stuff that falls above like the threshold for which I can buy something without asking my spouse, and which I would never buy for myself. It's like the too big for any casual gift giver to give to me range. You know what I mean?
Yes, it's something you're never going to buy for yourself, and it's probably like you feel silly. Like, can I spend an absurd amount of money on this thing?
Yes. So that was it. And I think I posted photos of it, and we talked about it on the show when I got it last year. But I've now had it for 8 months, and I've already put it has a minutes counter that counts how many minutes you've used it for, and I think I've already put like 120 minutes on it. Like I love this Blendtec blender.
I love that it's got like one of those engine time counters. It's like every 100 hours you need to go in and do a serious overhaul of the transmission. Every 150 hours you got to remember to top off the fluids.
What's third on your list?
Well, this is going to become a really stupid segment because 2 of our appliances are the same. Like, yeah, it's the Osterizer blender that I spent my first paycheck on. Like, clearly, like I told a whole story about this stupid blender, but I had my first job in high school. I got my first paycheck, which was cash under the table because that's how you pay high school kids. And I stopped at Best Buy and I bought myself a blender that wasn't $5 from Sears. An actual legit hardcore stainless steel on-off pulse, that was it, blender. And I think my parents still have and use the thing.
Yeah. I'll find which episode that was and link to it in the show notes because you did tell the whole story of it.
That's probably episode 2 or 3, man. That was back in the day.
Now, there's this phrase that we use in the military called saved rounds. Saved rounds is like when you're getting towards the end of something, but then you found out you had something and you need to go back to it. So I found out what that thing was called that I was trying to explain. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias in which people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. It is related to the cognitive bias of illusory superiority and comes from the inability of people to recognize their lack of ability. So basically, when you're not good at something, you think you're better than you are. And then when you get better at it, you realize how bad you are. Dunning-Kruger effect.
That's a really like mind-twisty one. We need to get into that later at some other point.
Yeah, I'll show you a graph of it. All right. So one of our users also asked, and I think this I'll let you decide how many more of these we need to do. We're getting right around our quit mark, but there was 2 or 3 of these that I'd written down. This would be a good segment on the show. Like one user asked, what did playing nerd games teach you growing up that you applied to real life? And I think we already tried to answer that question on this podcast, but maybe we could be more deliberate about it.
So, man, there's so many things. Like, because depending on the game, there's so many different like little lessons and things that I take away. Honestly, for me being... I sound like I'm a personable person on this podcast, but that's because I'm only talking to you, Ben, and we're good friends and you've known me forever. Like, if you put me in a situation with new people, I need structure. I have no idea how to interact. Small talk completely eludes me because I don't care about half the things people say anyway.
Yeah, you evidenced that last episode when you said if you could do one misdemeanor level thing, what would it be? And you'd be like, I want to blow people off in conversations.
That was the number one thing I want to do is I don't want to ever talk to people ever again. But, like, for me specifically, these nerd games give structure to a conversation and to a situation and to an interaction with another person that I need in order to form some kind of bond of shared experience so then I can develop and talk. Like, I go to these nerd conventions. Like, when we go to Vegas and have these giant, like, tournaments of Magic the Gathering, I'm not an outgoing person. I will never walk up to a stranger and introduce myself. But at a tournament where we're going to sit down and play a structured, best of 3 round of Magic, I will introduce myself. I will talk to this person. I will learn about this person. And, like, I'm capable of being a normal human being for the 1 hour round that I'm sitting across from a person, and I have these clear set rules and expectations of this is how you are going to interact with this person for the next hour. And
nice. That's a good example of what playing these games skill gave you.
Thank you. And that's enough of me opening up to hurtful and delicate parts of myself. What are yours? Silence. That's what we get.
That's really hard because all I'd written down for this is I think this is such a good question that it could be a recurring topic on the show. Magic the Gathering's current lead designer is a man by the name of Mark Rosewater, and we've talked about him by name on the show before. And he talks about this kind of thing a lot on his podcast and his column that he writes. And one of the things he kind of talks about is how Magic has a lot of the elements that a lot of games have. And they have things like interaction and surprise and randomness and stuff. And I realize how much the same kind of problem-solving skills I use to be good at Magic are really useful. I don't know how well it translates, like if I spend a lot of time learning a new deck or practicing matches or that kind of thing, like what's actually happening inside of my brain and psyche, and is that subconsciously or even consciously translating in other areas of my life and helping me be more successful.
No, just the sheer like analytical skills or practice or dedication or focus or just like all the little, the secondary and tertiary like skill set that you develop putting so much effort into a game like this, that has to translate. That has to give benefits, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I mean, we always tried to feed our mom the BS line about hand-eye coordination for, playing like Mega Man or something.
Listen, I've got the ultimate trump card for that one. When I was a kid, my parents were like, oh, you can't be playing video games all your life. What, are you going to get a job playing video games? Ben, I was a professional drone pilot for the military. Like, yeah, I played video games for a living. Like, take that,
really
Mom
boring
and Dad.
Ones. When I interviewed you about that, you described a shift where you sat down, didn't touch anything, didn't touch your console for the entire 8-hour shift, and then when the next guy came on to replace you, you walked away from it, having never touched it.
Yes, that did happen on multiple occasions, but it was all video game skill.
Now let's go back in time and tell 8-year-old Josh, who wanted to grow up and play video games when he got old, that is what the future held, and he would die inside a little.
I don't know, maybe. 8-year-old Josh played some really weird video games.
None where you sat there and watched a screen for 8 hours and didn't do anything.
All right, we can have a whole segment about what I call unfolding games in another podcast episode. But there are games that are like that, but we're moving on.
All right, there's a few other questions here that were asked that are really digging deep into insight, and I like them. This listener asked, what has the podcast journey taught you about yourself?
Oh, you're just going to throw that at me first off, huh?
I'll tell you mine first, and then you can go. I realized, obviously, as you've stated on the podcast, I'm the one that drove us starting this, but it's perpetuated because we both get something out of it. What I get out of it is that I had been longing for a creative outlet like this. I mean, I have I forget the name of it. I have a blog that I publish essays that I write to, and I put stuff on social media and I make videos for YouTube, but nothing really scratched the itch for me to have something creative that I do that takes thought and turns it into something coherent like this podcast does, and I really needed it.
That's good. It's important to have stuff like that in your life. If you don't have like 6 or 7 hobbies that you can just randomly pick up and do stuff, you need to have. You need to be able to get that out of your system.
Yeah, you definitely have that to a much greater extent.
What has the podcast journey taught me? Like, I mean, if we're talking the nitty gritty, I've learned how to actually create and maintain an RSS feed. Like, there's a bunch of little like technical details that I had to get into because that's my half of this. Like, you do all of the like a ton of the notes and a ton of the research and like the actual production and editing of the podcast. And it's been kind of my job to get everything online. But that's kind of dodging the question because I don't have any really like deep-seated personal things that I've learned about myself opening up. I do kind of like so the way I talk to you and the way I talk on the podcast is I'm always kind of aware that there's like a third person here, right? That there's like this listener, and I'll reference them like listeners, and like they don't have a name or anything, but I am aware that people are listening to the words that I'm saying now. And I've always been a person that just kind of says what I think, like all the time, period, which has gotten me into trouble many, many, many times in the military, right? But the fact that you and I are having this conversation and I'm just having this little cycle in my brain reminding me that, people are listening to this, I've had to be a lot more thoughtful and a lot more deliberate with some of the words that I say.
Ooh,
so like
that's a good one.
Like like before we start recording the podcast and after we end the podcast, I swear a lot. Like in casual conversation.
It is a different conversation.
And I don't know, maybe that makes me too crass, but it is just something about the culture, where I was growing up or where I live or whatever. Like it just comes naturally. Like these are the ways that I describe certain things. But the thoughtfulness in my words and making sure that I don't do that on the podcast, minus one slip up earlier this episode, like that, I think that's one of the biggest skills that I've developed and one of the things that I've learned doing this.
One of the questions one of our listeners asked is, what's the bravest thing you've ever done? I don't know that I had a hard time answering that question for myself, let alone for you. Well,
and here's the thing is I pined over that question for a while until I kind of clicked into this meta sense of the question. And I realized we are incapable of answering this question because if what we did,
I can get behind that.
If what we thought we did was brave at the time, then clearly we wouldn't think it was brave because people don't think they're brave when they do things that are brave.
Yeah, like when I was my last week as a school teacher, the principal asked me to sing the national anthem at the graduation ceremony. I sang a cappella, one of the hardest songs to sing in front of 1,000 people. And I guess I could say that was brave, but I did it pretty easily, and I didn't.
That's a good example of something that is brave. Like anything that I could say or any situation, like it would just, I would feel dumb calling myself brave for having done it because I did it at the time. And I didn't think I was brave then. So I don't know. Maybe that's a cop-out from this question. But
okay, I'm going to put a placeholder in here. You remember when we got together in Vegas for the Grand Prix in 2019, and I had a story to tell you that had just come to a head. It was when I had to appear before the school board of my local school because of a conflict in our family. And I actually want to tell the whole story on the podcast if you don't mind. But that one took some courage to kind of take on some bureaucrats.
You see, that's funny because you stood up to the man and you thought that was very brave. And me, that's my default stance. It's like, screw the man.
Standing up to the man?
Yeah, like that's my I want to screw the man because that's just who I am.
Well, what you were saying about it being kind of meta, I remember I also told the story, I think just 1 or 2 episodes ago, about when I returned from Afghanistan, I wrote a citation for all the things my wife had done while I was away taking care of our family. And I read them off in front of a crowd of people in the airport, and I pinned my medal on her, and everyone cheered for her for what she did for freedom. And I remember at the time I was doing that, my hands were visibly shaking. You know how when I'm in a Magic tournament and I get really excited? It was like that times 2.
Oh, wow.
When I was reading this citation about my wife in the airport.
It couldn't have been 2 because like you can't read Ben gets really shaky, people, when he's like really into something. Okay. So if you want a legit answer, like my meta answer is like anything I do I don't think is brave.
Right.
But the only other solution that I could come up with this question specifically is there's only been a handful of times in my life where I had to suppress panic, where my brain wanted to go into incoherent gibberishness or just escape from whatever the situation was, and I had to consciously push that emotion down and figure out what the next steps were going to be to keep going forward.
What was it?
There's 3 times. So the first time I was at basic training, and I was crawling through a tunnel. And it was just a corrugated steel tunnel, right, full of sand. And I was crawling on my stomach. And the way that they had filled it with dirt is that it kept getting smaller and smaller towards the end, right?
And you're kind of a big guy.
I'm a very large person. And like there was one point where I was so tight in there that my one part of my helmet was scraping against the tunnel. The other part of the helmet was scraping through the sand. One arm was completely pinned, and I had one hand that I could move about 1.5 feet to try to push the sand out of my way so I could continue to crawl through this tunnel.
Holy crap.
And it was the tightest spot, like literally the tightest situation I've ever been in. And I had a moment where I just wanted to indulge in panic, where I just wanted to freak out. And I would not have been the only person that day. Many people just completely lost their minds being stuck in those tunnels. And I consciously pushed it down and no, we're going to get through this. And I dug my way out of the stupid tunnel and continued doing the obstacle course.
Wow. Good one. All right. What were the other two?
So the second time was also at the academy. There was a required class is water survival. And you have to do 6 weeks of learning how to survive if your plane crashes in the middle of the ocean and you have no flotation device. So this entire class is performed in full uniform, in full camouflage, like shirt, undershirt, pants, the whole 9 yards, right? And I'm a very, very good swimmer, Ben. And I did not want to take this class. And the very first lesson, they let you validate. And they say, if you can do these set of tests, then we will let you go and we'll give you an A in the class and you don't have to come back to any of the lessons because you basically got it. And the biggest cut, the thing that they have everybody do first, because if you can't do it, you're just taking this class, is you have to swim one length of an Olympic pool, which is 25 yards, underwater, in one breath, in full uniform.
Wow.
And yeah, you get to about the 2/3 point and you're drowning. Like you're literally drowning.
Yeah, you're starting, yeah.
Like you have to, like your lungs are like reflexively trying to inhale water, kind of thing, right? Uh-huh. And so that was like, no, shove it down. I'm not going to drown. I'm just going to suck it up for another 5 feet or whatever it was.
I can do anything for the next 20 feet, yeah.
Except, not breathe. That one's tough. So that was the second time.
Okay.
The third time, it was.
Did you make it?
Yeah, I did make it. Of course I made it.
Okay.
Validated. Never had to go back to class. Got an A. It was great. It was great. The only A in a PE class I ever got at the academy.
I love that. Did a lot of people not make it?
Oh, yeah. No. There was like 40 people in the class, and there was 6 of us that validated.
Okay.
So it was not easy.
That says something about you, though. That you're not necessarily practiced that, but you're just so determined that you forced yourself through it.
I'm also a very good swimmer. Like, I'm a very good swimmer.
Okay. All right. Go ahead with the third one.
All right. So the third one, I was helping EOD, which is Explosive Ordnance Disposal. These people, their whole job is explosives. And I was in Afghanistan, and I was helping them dispose of explosive ordnance. They had done buyback programs where, like,
dude, your photo ended up in the Air Force Times for this, I think.
Did it really? Oh, that's cool. Well, anyway, like they did a program where
Let's see if I can dig it up.
We don't want the bad guys to have explosives, so they basically just said, "Hey, if you have explosives, we'll buy them, no questions asked." And so a bunch of locals show up with a bunch of explosives, like rocket rounds, just old like unexploded old Soviet era bombs and things that never blew up. Just,
artillery shells.
You wouldn't believe the stuff that came out of the woodwork. But they had like hundreds and hundreds of pounds worth of just old explosives that are just, they're explosives.
Yeah, leaky and unstable.
And toxic chemicals and, all down the line. And I hung out with these guys together, the only other Air Force people on this base that I was in Afghanistan. And they said, hey, we literally just need manpower. Like, we need help hauling these explosives out to the middle of the desert so we can blow them up. And I'm like, I'm on board. I'm there because I was 22, 23 at the time, single, no connections. Like, yeah, man, this sounds great. Let's do it. And I remember we're out in the desert and we're building a pile. We're literally building this pile of explosives. And like we stop every few...
And then you're putting more explosives on top of the pile.
Yeah, we had to stop every few minutes because they would then layer it with C4. And they say, okay, go ahead. And then we would layer more explosives on top of it, making this like great explosive sandwich. And I remember he goes, I'm going back to the trailer for next load. And he goes, oh, here, cup your hands. I'm like, okay. And I cut my hands as big as I can. And he starts pouring these they look like glass balls. And they're about the size of like a cue ball from billiards or pool.
Uh-huh.
And he fills my hands with these. And I'm like, what are these? And he's like, oh, these are expired fuses for mortar rounds that the Army guys had. They expired. They can't use them anymore. By the way, these are probably the most unstable and explosive thing that we have. So be gentle with them. And just put them down. I'm like, what happens if they go off? And like with my hands, my double hand full of these like heaping handful of round balls made of glass that I'm supposed
he had to be putting you on.
That I'm supposed to dump on this pile. Maybe, but like he says, like, oh, well, don't worry. If they go off and it cooks off the pile, his words, if it cooks off the pile, you will die faster than the speed of pain. And yeah, you can laugh about that now, but there I was in the middle of the desert with a handful. Like, this was the first time it hit me.
Don't worry. It won't hurt when you get vaporized.
Like, this is the first time it hit me. I'm in the middle of Afghanistan. I have a handful of unstable chemical explosives. I am standing 3 feet from literally tons of explosive material. I could die at any second. And I swear, Ben, I have never had a stronger compulsion to just turn and run. And just run away. Just away from this danger to my mortal being.
Fascinating that you got there by degrees and you were just the proverbial frog being boiled.
That's basically, yeah.
At one point, all of a sudden, you just have this epiphany that, wow, I'm in a lot of danger right now.
Yeah, and maybe he was putting me on. Man, I hope he was putting me on. But those guys, the way they operated, I don't think he was. They were all just a little off. But obviously, I didn't get vaporized. Maybe that should have been the darkest timeline. Josh got cooked off in a pile in Afghanistan.
Well, at the time you sent me back some photos from that of you like just in that barren mountain range, standing next to that humongous pile of explosives, and I think I should be able to dig those up. So if I can, I'll make that available to our listeners.
Oh,
that'll be great.
Wouldn't that be fun? That was my birthday, by the way. I think it was my 22nd or 23rd birthday.
Yeah, that's right. It was like this month, 15 years ago.
Awesome.
Huh. All right. Well, there's one more question I think we'll do, and then we'll call it quits here.
Okay.
This one was bucket list items you've accomplished and more you want to accomplish. And I think this can kind of be a feature here. Now, the idea of a bucket list is kind of the idea that you have this like master plan of things you want to do before you die. But the word bucket kind of, I think, implies that it's stuff that you know that your death is imminent and you're trying to get as many things in as you can. I don't think I've ever had that, but I think I have had just good quality experiences. We've talked in this show about how I'm very high in the psychological basic personality trait of openness. Like, I'll try anything. You know, if something's going on, I want to give it a shot. So I've had a few experiences, more than a few experiences, where just my openness has brought some really cool experiences in my life, and I had a couple that came to mind. The first of which was one day my school that I was teaching at in Nevada had a teacher in-service coming up, and they said, oh, by the way, as part of the teacher in-service, we're going to have a karaoke contest, and the prize will be, I don't remember if they said the prize in advance, but anyway, the prize was a pair of tickets to go see Penn and Teller at the Rio. So I knocked it out of the park with my rendition of Garth Brooks' Friends in Low Places.
Of course.
Won the tickets and took. There was no way we could have afforded these tickets. They were like $80 each, and it was like right in the center in the front in the theater at the Rio to see Penn and Teller. And the magic show was fantastic. But the part they don't tell you is before the magic show, you're waiting for everybody to come into the seats to kind of entertain people. They're playing this really soft, nice, mellow jazz. They call it music to look at boxes by. And their shtick is that up on the stage they have some of their props that they're going to use during the show, and to kind of show you that it's real, they let members of the audience voluntarily just kind of walk up on stage and examine the props.
That's cool.
So I went up, so I'm like, come on, let's go, because I'm open to new experience. So most people are just staying in their seats, but my wife and I go up on stage and we're looking at them. She's like, that's interesting, let's go back to our seats. I'm like, no way. And I start trying to climb into one of the boxes.
Of course you do.
I got in a lot of trouble.
Oh, did you? I was going to say, did you get cut in half? No, you got kicked out of this.
I fell through the trapdoor. No, yeah, that got me in a lot of trouble. So that was that's music to get in trouble by Penn and Teller at the Rio. That's
a good bucket list item. Get kicked out of a magic show in Las Vegas. Yeah, I like that. All right, so I had a couple come to mind when it comes to bucket list stuff, and it's just kind of generic, like life experiences that I feel like you should have. Mm-hmm. And so one of them, it's always some kind of like extreme, right? Like a bucket list, the implication is that this is something that's outside of your normal scope, something that you wouldn't do, something that you have to pursue, okay?
Agreed.
Okay. So one of those bucket list items that I had that I accomplished was I wanted to run a marathon.
Okay.
So there was...
That's a common one.
It's a common...
Like if you just took a generic bucket list, that would probably be on it.
Well, thanks, Ben. I don't feel like any lowered by that.
Really, though? Honestly.
Come on. Yeah. Have you run a marathon?
No, I have
Then
not.
shut up. So
That's why it's a bucket list item. It's uncommon and
Yeah.
not a lot of people achieve it.
Well, get on it, buddy, because guess what? It's all downhill from here. Like, the chances that you run a marathon only get smaller as time goes by.
Okay, listeners, I want you to mark this because I think by next April, if whatever is going on with the COVID is let up, I will be running a marathon this time next April.
Are you serious? Like, did you sign?
Yeah.
Have you signed up for it? Have you put money?
I have not signed up for it yet.
Sign up for it, then I might start taking you seriously.
All right.
But no, I trained for it. I did not train hard enough for it. And then my dad and my brother and I, we all ran it's the Baton Death March. It's in White Sands, New Mexico. And you have to, at one point, you have to run up a mountain. At another point, you have to run 2 miles through a sand bed. They say it's like one of the harder marathons that you can run. And I ran it, and it sucked, and I never want to do it again. But I'm super happy that I ran it. Like the race that I like now.
I'm a bit envious of the Tough Mudder Baton Death March marathon kind of thing that you've just had people around you that encourage and participate with you in these kinds of things.
I will say, listeners, a half marathon is like the sweet spot. It's like you can train for it without really like disrupting your daily life. But like a marathon, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. If you're going to run a marathon, there are going to be a couple weekends where you've got to get a 20-mile run in, and that's just your whole day. That's all you're going to do that day, and it's a huge time commitment. So, like, half marathons are the sweet spot, but you can surge up and do a marathon. I encourage you to do it. One that I would like to do that I have not is I want to go skydiving. Not because I want to. I'm definitely terrified of the idea of jumping out of a perfectly good airplane and relying on what is basically a large bed sheet to save my life. And I'm a big guy. So like I don't necessarily want to do that, but I think that's one of those, again, it's one of those extreme situations that there's no time in your life naturally you would just be falling for more than a few seconds, right? So that's also a common bucket list item. If you want to bust my chops some more about that, Ben, but that's on there.
No, you just did it yourself. But if I got to add one to the list, it's one I want to do that I haven't done yet. I have never surfed, and I would like to try surfing.
That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
You have to live somewhere that has surfing first, though. Mr. I live in Illinois.
Well, live not necessarily. That you could do that on a vacation.
Well, let me know how your surfing goes when you move to Salt Lake City, Utah after your retirement.
Yeah. All right. We still have a few questions we didn't get to, but I think we got to the best ones that brought out the good discussion. Thank you to all of our listeners who contributed questions. If you enjoyed this, we'll offer the opportunity maybe next year after we've done another year of the podcast, and then hopefully we can give you another chance if you have a hankering to just ask some stuff we aren't naturally happening across on the podcast.
We'll have to wait until we get to a number that is the natural sum of 3 consecutive numbers, right?
Absolutely. So, that was fantastic.
I don't know what number that is off the top of my head, but I'm sure it's very far from now.
Okay. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of the Bad Magic Podcast. Thanks to our listeners. Thanks to our supporters. Like Josh always says, if you enjoy what we do, share it with a friend. Thank you for coming and joining us, and if you would join in the discussion, I put show notes on every episode that kind of give some surrounding and supporting information. I put photos and graphics that I make up from every episode on Facebook. You can join in the discussion there, and for every episode on Reddit, the Bad at Magic subreddit on Reddit, you can join in the discussion there. And if you want to show some love to the podcast, you can go to the patreon.com/badatmagic and support us there.
Thanks to all our listeners. We love you all very much. Appreciate that you actually come back every week to listen to us banter about nonsense and Ben bust my chops about things.